It is Thursday, the 21st of September 2017, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So I went to Las Vegas.
You did go to Vegas.
I spent 5 days in Las Vegas.
It didn't seem like the best choice.
I mean, it's not my kind of town, Vegas.
No.
In fairness.
Well,
Although you did wrap our Christmas presents in incredibly sparkly paper that we still have glitter everywhere. So
That's
you
true.
clearly do like some sparkly things.
On the flight over there, actually, I watched the new Alien film, Alien Covenant.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't watch that.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother.
Yeah, it's bollocks. And none of the characters in it make any sense.
Not even Neil Fassbender?
No,
Neither of them?
None of them.
No.
None of the characters make sense whatsoever.
Not even a xenomorph?
No, doesn't make any sense. They've filled in a backstory for the xenomorphs. It's like, oh, well, that's a bit shit. Actually,
Yeah.
I preferred it when it was just they were monsters that they found on a planet
weird
somewhere.
slasher out there.
But mild spoilers for Alien Covenant, but I'm not spoiling it because don't fucking watch it.
Yeah,
it's
worthless,
shit.
yeah.
So they're colonists. They're on the way to a planet somewhere, and they pick up a signal, which is they recognise it, and it's like, oh, that's music. That's some fucking song that I know from some fucking album. And so they divert course to this planet. It's like, what are you doing? Your colonists and scientists have chosen this colony that you're going to, but you divert the course of the
Just
ship
do it
to
anyway.
go off and do this
Yeah.
for no reason. They get to the planet. They send a shuttle down to the planet, and they go, the air's breathable. Right, out we go then. It's like, well, hang on. Microbes, bacteria, how do you know you're not going to get sick? How do you know?
I didn't watch the previous one as well, but was it not the same as the previous one?
In the previous
Same
one,
issue?
they did similar. Like, they went out onto the surface of their thing in spacesuits and then went, oh, the atmosphere's breathable, and all took their helmets off. And it's like, no, you wouldn't do that. You're scientists. What are you doing?
I'm sure I heard George Hrab and the SGU complaining about it in both films, I think, yeah.
In this one, didn't even bother with the spacesuits. They just went, well, breathable, off we go. Open the door, and they go, beautiful, new... What?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Crazy. So, Alien Covenant was shit.
You watched anything else on the plane?
The other thing I watched on the plane was King Arthur. New King Arthur film.
The one with...
Charlie Hunnam in it.
Who's that?
He was
That's the one I'm thinking.
He was the precocious little knob in Queer as Folk.
I haven't seen Queer as Folk.
Have you not seen Queer as Folk?
No.
It's brilliant, Queer as Folk. Great bit of television.
You only watched it because it was written by the same guy as Doctor Who.
Oh, no, because it wasn't at the time.
I mean, it was.
It wasn't. He hadn't written Doctor Who yet
but
at the time.
he is that guy. Okay, so you watched it anyway, okay.
I watched it because one of the characters was a Doctor Who
Is that
fan.
Russell T. Davis?
Russell T. Davis. So it's got...
You watched it because one of the characters was a Doctor Who fan?
Oh, yeah.
Jesus, Mike. Jesus. I almost let that one slip, but Jesus.
What?
What if there's other TV programmes where some of them quite like Doctor Who?
And I watch them too, probably, except The Big Bang Theory, because I can't fucking abide that.
Yeah, but that's not a character liking Doctor Who, because they're not really characters at all. It's like a crudely done caricature says some of the words that may once have appeared in a Doctor Who episode.
Yeah. So you've got Charlie Hunnam playing King Arthur.
Yeah.
Except he's not King Arthur yet. He's just like street urchin Arthur.
Is David Beckham in that film?
David Beckham's got
That's
a
what I
little
was thinking
cameo
about
in
it, yeah.
Which he's a bit rubbish. I mean, he's
he
not
would be,
bad
he's a
given
footballer.
that he's not an actor,
not an
but
actor.
he's
He's not Cantona. He's not Frank LaBeouf.
Vinnie Jones did a better acting job
Really?
as an actor, but then Vinnie Jones is quite good acting the hard man.
Well, just being Vinnie Jones.
He's a bit of a hard man.
Well, he's acted it his entire career.
David Beckham, he was all right. He was a bit squeaky. He's David Beckham. And Aidan Gillen was in it as well, who listeners might know better as Littlefinger from Game of Thrones. But
Or the fellow from Queer as Folk.
was also in Queer as Folk.
Okay, so
And
it's a Queer as Folk reunion.
it's a little Queer as Folk reunion because him and Charlie Hunnam have got loads of scenes together, which I can imagine being quite awkward on set. Being like, right, Charlie, last time I saw you, we were... yeah, we were.
Yeah, we were, yeah.
I've seen your... I know you have.
Yeah.
That's fine. So I watched King Arthur, directed by Guy Ritchie. And felt like a Guy Ritchie movie. It felt
I'm
like...
not sure I could tell what that feels like.
The entire film felt like it was a montage.
Okay.
Like the entire movie was a montage. But Alien Covenant, shit. King Arthur, better than I thought it would be.
Okay.
Which is not to say it was good.
I mean, you have to tell us now how good you thought it was, otherwise it's a completely meaningless metric.
I thought it was going to be shit.
Okay.
But it was better than I thought it was going to be.
Better than shit.
Better than I thought it was going to be. So I actually quite enjoyed it because I went in with low expectations and got something that was actually, oh, that was all right. Whereas if I'd gone and thinking this is going to be brilliant, I'd have been disappointed.
So how good did you think Alien Covenant was going to be? Because surely your expectations of that were rock bottom.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be shit, and it met every one of those expectations. It was thoroughly shit.
Right.
So I watched the films on the plane, and I landed in Las Vegas airport. As we're coming off the plane, and we're walking past the departure lounge, and we could see it through the windows. Slot machines.
Yeah.
In the airport. Like, as soon as you get off the plane, the first thing I saw
Which is hard, because you're so morally and ideologically opposed to gambling. Especially mechanical devices that help you gamble.
Every horizontal surface, as far as I could see, had a slot machine on it. Even when you go into a pub and you go up to the bar, and the bar wasn't a bar, the bar was slot machine, slot machine, slot machine, slot machine. On the bar, you had to peer over a slot machine to order a drink from the person behind the bar. Every vertical surface had a picture of some boobs on it. Basically, every horizontal surface had a slot machine. Every vertical surface had some boobs on it. And there's
Does that vertical surface include the front of people's t-shirts?
Basically, yeah. Okay. Quite often.
Are you sure they weren't just topless?
That did happen. There were several restaurants which were topless restaurants, and it was like, come in here and all the waitresses are topless. At one point, I looked out of the hotel window and saw this huge tower, and it was white and gold. It looked horrible and cheap and tacky, and I didn't enjoy it at all. And it was like, you get that one-way glass where it's silver on one side and you can see through it on the other one. It was like that, except they'd used gold instead of silver for the one man. Oh, it's the Trump Tower.
Oh, of course it is.
It literally looked like a skyscraper that was a bar of gold. And it just ostentatious, vulgar, everything I fucking hate in people.
Yeah.
It was awful. But so that was my overall impression of Vegas. So if I've not pissed off every single listener who lives in Vegas by this point, I'll keep going. So
good.
I was there for a conference. I was there for a conference with work. So we were there for a conference on esports, which for listeners who don't know what esports is.
It's people who take ecstasy and do sports.
Esports is competitive video gaming. So it's people playing video games against each other for money, which we used to do back in the 90s, where you'd play like Doom against each other, or Duke Nukem or Quake, or something like that. We used to do that back in the day, but not for money.
Oh, right.
Now suddenly it is people doing it professionally and getting paid for it. So I was there for an esports conference, but the conference was only for a couple of days. So I had a couple other days to tool around Vegas and see what was going on. So I discovered there was a monorail. There was a monorail that runs right through Vegas.
Good. I like monorails.
Why are they better than dual rail or rails?
I don't know. They're just. I feel like you're flying.
I quite like the monorail. So
good.
We saw the monorail, and it goes from like hotel to hotel to hotel all the way down Vegas. And so we had this because I was over there with Lana. So we had this idea where we said, okay, we'll get on the monorail, we'll go right to the end and go to the far station, and then we'll walk back up and kind of take in the Vegas Strip on the way. And eventually we'll get tired and bored, and we'll just get an Uber back or hop on the nearest monorail or whatever. So we're wandering down to the monorail, obviously singing the monorail song from The Simpsons.
I don't remember what that is.
It's one of the most famous episodes of The Simpsons.
I remember the episode. I don't remember the monorail song.
Sitting there saying, "Is there a chance the track could bend?" Which is one of the lines from the monorail song. So I'm saying that, but like casually going, "Do you think there's a chance the track could bend?" To which the retort is, "Not on your life, my Hindu friend," or something along those lines was the line from The Simpsons. So Lana's saying that back to me. And we got to the monorail, and we got on the monorail, and it set off, and it was the most rickety monorail. And I was like, "Is there a chance the track could bend?" Yes, yes, there is.
Certainly.
There's definitely a chance that this track is going to bend. So we went all the way down to the monorail, and we ended up in the a hotel called the MGM Grand, which is owned by MGM.
Very famous hotel.
Because it turns out that all the hotels in Vegas, at least all the ones that I found, are not hotels. They are
casinos,
hotels and casinos and theatres and malls.
Yes.
All in one building. It's like a little village where you can sleep and eat, and like malls.
It's because outside is a fucking desert.
There are many shops in there, and you can charge any shop to your hotel room.
That's weird. But isn't it because latitudinally Vegas is comparable to the Sahara?
Yeah, I mean, it was fucking hot. It was fucking hot. Actually, it rained most of the time.
It's like you went and hauled it to the Sahara.
It was still fucking hot.
You can hot and rain.
And like the hotel I was in, which is the Westgate, that was exactly the same, was this kind of combination mall, theatre, casino and hotel. And all the way down the monorail, it was like these big casino resorts where there was a pool and a gym, which most hotels have, but also casinos and shops and things like that. So we got to the end of the MGM Grand. We got off and obviously I'm in a suit.
Obviously, you're in a full suit. At least were you in just a two-piece, not a three-piece?
No, it was a full three-piece suit.
You were wearing the waistcoat as well?
Yeah.
Why?
You're going to get heat stroke one day.
Vegas, innit? So we got off the monorail and we're wandering into the MGM Grand. The first thing that happens as we get off the monorail, literally, aside from the station smelling of cabbage, was a woman came up to us and said, "Well, you're looking very sharp today, sir." And I said, "Oh, no, not at all. I'm just English." Which was my stock reply to anyone who commented on the suit, was like, "Why are you dressed up like that? I'm English." And everyone just went, "Oh, okay." As if that was a perfectly reasonable answer to that question. They would just go, "All right, okay, yeah, English, I see."
In case we have any geographical pedants, just point out, I've figured out that it's not level with Sahara, it's level with Tunisia.
Tunisia, right, okay.
But Tunisia is still classically quite hot.
It's still quite deserty. It's where they shot
if you look at it
Star
on a
Wars.
map,
all the desert scenes in Star Wars.
Gotcha. If you look at it on Google Earth as well, Tunisia is yellow.
Yes.
It's one of the yellow places, whereas the rest of the places tend to be greener. Apart from Spain, Spain's quite rocky.
So she said, "Do you want to see a TV program?" And I said,
"You were like, I've got a telly, so that's not that big a..."
She said, "It's a pilot of a new show. It hasn't aired yet.
Okay.
We want your opinion. You go in...
Your British opinion.
Take you about an hour. We want your opinion on the TV show. And you can tell us what you thought of the TV show, and was it a good show, was it a bad show. Take you about an hour.
Okay.
If you don't have an hour, don't do it. We're not trying to sell you anything. It's not a timeshare. Just, do you want to do it?" And so we said,
"I thought that it's a timeshare. Like you get to watch this TV show, but there's a pitch before it. No, it's just like instead of like the bit at the end is like the free thing that you get. It's like the TV show is the bit at the end, like the reward. It's like, yeah, you get to see the TV show, but you have to sit through an hour-long sales pitch
first. Through a timeshare presentation first. So he said, "Yeah, all right, we'll do that." So they gave me these 2 tickets to go to the thing. And we stood in the line to see the television program. I went up to the thing and said, "I've got these things that some guy gave us," and said, "Those, sir, are called tickets." I thought, "You sarcastic little fuck off."
Yeah.
I said, "Don't..." Well, that's what I said inside. Outside, I said, "Oh, don't you come with your television jargon with me."
Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I love the way you're like, "Oh, God, he was being sarcastic." So what I said was...
So they said, go and stand in the line over there. So we're standing in the line waiting to see the TV show. And another woman came up to us and said, "You're here to see the TV show?" I said, "Yeah." They said, "Do you mind telling me how old you are?" And I said, "Well, I'm in this old man category here, and Lana's in this young lady category here." And they said, "Oh, right, okay, and you're English?" Yeah. I said, We've got an idea. Would you mind, instead of seeing a television show, would you like to play with some gadgets instead? And then tell us what you think about those, and we will give you $50 cash.
Nice.
In exchange for that.
So they said, "Here's your tickets, come back in an hour." You came back in an hour. They didn't let you into that one. And you spent the entire day in queues.
In lines.
Because they're like, "Are you British?" "Yes." "Would you like to queue for something else for a while?"
They know we're very good at it. Very, very good at it. You could tell who
and they
was
were just
British
taking notes of
and who wasn't.
Okay, yeah, I can see the queuing technique there. It's pretty good. Pretty good.
So they took 4 of us. There was a guy... Casey, his name was Casey.
Okay. I mean,
so there was Casey,
there
was me and Lana, and there was a woman called Veronica. So 2 men, 2 women. We went into this room, and there were a load of laptops laid out on the table.
You immediately felt comfortable.
I thought, I know where I stand here. So they revealed these laptops one at a time under a black cloth, like it was...
Wow.
Like they said, "We're not allowed to tell you which of these laptops we're interested in, but we're going to take the..."
And then they put a black cloth over, and then when you came back, one of the laptops was missing. You had to remember which one...
So he pulled a thing off, and there was like a Dell laptop there. There was an HP laptop. There was an Acer. There was an iPad with a keyboard attached. There was a Microsoft Surface with a keyboard attached. There was a Lenovo laptop there as well. And they were just like laptops. Most of them were laptop tablet convertibles. So you could pull the monitor off. And it was a thing, or fold it in half, or whatever. Like it was the Lenovo Yoga that they'd used for that. What stood out, they said, "You look at these laptops, you're not allowed to refer to them by the brand names. They've got letters. You have to talk to them about the letters." And I said, well, immediately the one I wanted to say is that laptop G is fucking ugly. Because laptop G had the chassis on it. Classically, a laptop, the chassis will be made of like aluminium or plastic or maybe carbon fiber. I think the Microsoft Surface uses magnesium as a case.
Yeah, but you're in Vegas, so it was gold.
It was leather.
Ew.
It was a leather laptop.
Oh.
So I said that.
Was it leather or was it fake leather?
It was actual leather. It was real leather.
And then the one next to it is fur.
So I said, they said, what's your first impressions of your laptop? So straight with a fucking leather laptop's the ugliest thing I've ever fucking seen. That's horrendous. I don't care if that's the best fucking computer in the world. That is ugly as hell and I wouldn't go anywhere fucking near it. Then Casey piped up and said, "Yeah, I agree with Mike. That's fucking awful.
Yeah.
I'm not buying. People will make fun of me if I buy that."
At which point they went, "Thank you for your time, guys. Out you go now," because that's
So we sat there and they said, "What do you think of this one? What do you think of this one? Would you buy this one? We're going to open it up, have a look at it. You can't touch it.
So, what do you think of these laptops? From looks alone?
Yes, we weren't allowed to touch them.
What is the fucking point?
To touch the laptops.
Which of these laptops do you want without using it, knowing how good it is, or getting any function out of it? I don't buy a laptop for how it looks. Yeah. Ever.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't buy this HP laptop.
I wouldn't buy a leather one.
With its fucking leather case.
No.
Turns out this was market research for HP.
Yeah.
Who were trying out their new leather laptop and wanted to see if people will buy it.
But it's insane. It's not going to breathe well either, is it?
No.
Because classically leather isn't permeable because it's on the outside of cows. Keeping the inside of cows in.
You spill coffee on that, that's going to start to stain. Yeah. It's going to smell.
When it gets too hot, it's going to start smelling of like warm leather.
It's going to peel at the edges because it's a screen in this leather case. At some point, there's fucking super glue involved here, holding the leather against it. It was just hideous. It was horrible. So I sat there and fucking slated HP's laptop. I said, "What do you think of these specifications?" I said, "The specifications are very good. I wouldn't buy it. A fucking leather laptop. What are you doing? Don't make laptops out of leather. Are you mad? The trackpad was fucking leather. Don't be ridiculous. Fucking ridiculous shit." So HP paid me $50 for slating their laptop for them.
Nice.
Which was quite nice. They had the room wide with microphones to listen to me in my British accent. That's a fucking ugly
Did it have
laptop.
that two-way glass where one side was gold?
Yeah, we could we could hear some HP executives crying behind the glass as I laid into their pet project as a leather So if this comes out, listeners...
It's
I
not
tried.
Your fault.
I fucking tried.
Yeah.
I said, don't do it. I think they were thinking because when you close it up, it kind of looks like a nicely bound book.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where they were going with it.
Still weird.
So you would carry that around with you, and look at them with their nicely
with a book.
Leather bound book.
Oh, it's not a book. It's a laptop.
Open the book, and it's a laptop like Penny in Inspector Gadget, where she had the book with a fucking computer in it, which we all went, ridiculous, with her book, computer, and computer watch.
Yeah.
And now we all have like fucking laptops and Fitbits and Apple Watches. So we came out of there.
Okay. This is still day one, so strap in. He was there a week.
Came back the next day, said, "Can I see my fucking telly program now, please?"
He said, "You haven't got your tickets on you anymore."
I said, "Don't come at me with your theatre jargon." They said, yeah, go and stand in line over there. So we went and stood in line. We finally got in to see this fucking TV program.
It was an advert for HP, and then you led their laptops.
And so it was a big screen. There was a computer sitting in front of it. It was like, enter your name and address and shit. And we had a thing with a knob on it, with a happy green face at one end.
Yeah.
And a sad red face at the other end.
Yeah,
and
because it's sunburnt.
The knob was in the middle, and I had to dial the knob one way or the other as I watched the show.
Typically, the knob is in the middle.
To indicate how much I liked the show.
How much green or red you were.
So happy, good, sad, down, happy, good, and then answer some questions afterwards. And so they said, we can't tell you what the show is. It's half finished. Some of the visual effects aren't done. And I'm thinking, Star Trek. It's a new Star Trek. I'm really excited. This is going to be a new Star Trek. Brilliant.
Came on. It wasn't Star Trek. Red immediately. Boom.
Came on. It was the remake of Dynasty.
The visual effects weren't done.
So
yeah, I mean, we're going to put the shoulder pads in and post.
So the opening scene, they're standing there with a green screen out the window going, look at the beautiful day it is in wherever the fuck Vegas, I think it's Atlanta, it's set in. Where they haven't CGI'd.
Is it not Atlanta? Is it Atlanta, Texas?
It's set in Atlanta now.
Why?
The remake is set in Atlanta.
Atlanta?
God knows
Atlanta,
why.
Georgia?
God knows why.
Have they gone from oil fields to cotton fields?
Don't get confused with Dallas. Don't get confused with Dallas.
Oh, no, I was confused with Dallas.
Don't get confused
Was Dynasty
with
not
Dallas.
also Texas? I thought the Dynasty was that they were an oil family.
The only thing I remember about Dynasty is that they went a bit mad about 7 seasons in and had someone kidnapped by UFOs.
And then that it was a dream all along.
That was Dallas.
That was Dallas. Alice.
That was Dallas. So,
what about Knots Landing? Where's that fit in?
It opened up with a woman character doing a voiceover, and they said, "Don't mention this to your mates." So I didn't tell you this.
Or put it out on a podcast to 20,000 listeners.
They said, "Don't tell anyone this." Fuck you. So it opened up with a woman standing there talking to 2 guys, and the guys had been quite condescending towards her. And she in a voiceover goes, and then there was these 2 mansplainers. And I thought, all right, okay, a little bit green. Okay, women's empowerment. That's a step up on the old fucking.
Okay.
They did a flashback to when one of the characters was a kid and he was playing piano and he was playing the original Dynasty theme on the piano. And so I thought, a bit of nostalgia. Okay, I'll download. When it got to the rich businessman's hot new wife who's only sleeping with him for the money having a slappy bitch fight with his eldest daughter, I dialed that down a bit.
I mean, that's just a soap.
I dialed that quite. Oh, it was bad.
Well, yeah, but it's going to be. I mean, it was Dallas.
It started off, I thought, oh, this looks quite good. Oh, God, it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I do not like these characters. I can identify with nothing about them. Watching the lives of the absurdly mega wealthy rich has no interest for me whatsoever. And when the show had finished and they said, "Tell us what you think of Dynasty," they got that in fucking paragraphs. The dialogue is fucking shit. It's just fuck off. This fucking was just fucking bollocks.
It does sound awful.
It was really shit. So when Dynasty airs, bear in mind, 1, that's not really Atlanta out the window. That was a fucking green screen when I watched it.
Yep.
And 2, it's bollocks. Don't watch it.
Don't
watch it. It's bollocks. So that was Las Vegas. But I got you guys a little present.
You got us a present.
I've got you a little Las Vegas present.
Blimey.
I've got you a little dice.
Oh.
That says, it says Michael's Casino on
Alice's Casino.
And,
That's cute.
And on Alice's one, it says Alice's Casino.
Is this because there are an infinite number of casinos in Vegas and therefore all
you now both
possibilities?
Technically own a casino in Las Vegas, which is just sitting there ticking over, earning money.
Which is the only way to make money in Vegas.
For the pair of you out there.
Oh, wow, thank you.
That's cute. Thank you very much.
We went to a gig.
We did.
We went to see Magnetic Fields.
We went to a gig.
So we were seeing Daniel Kitchen, who's very, very good, and we saw Interpol, and they were good. But while we were getting to that gig, I got a message from Mike in Bristol, listener, lovely guy, who
Quality
said...
name.
Quality name.
It does have a quality name.
He'd said, this was actually the night before, he'd said, Magnetic Fields are this band from America. They're in Liverpool. You should go along. They'd be really good. I was like, oh, okay. Oh, it's on the Sunday. We can't go. He said, oh, it's on the Monday as well. They're doing 2 shows back to back. So you should go along. And I didn't answer. And he said, I've put you on the guest list. I was like, what? How do you know? How have you got us on the guest list? And he said, so it was along the lines of, I am the unlikely recipient of some fortuitous happenstance. That's saying nothing, Mike. That says nothing at all. So on the Monday, Nicola couldn't go, so me and Alice went along to the gig. I got a message from one of the singers in the band on Twitter who DM'd me to say, like, we put you on the guest list, looking forward to meeting you. And as we got there, they were like, yeah, so you can come backstage for a drink. So we had this interesting experience where we saw the band.
Who did they think you were?
No one. No one. This is the thing. No one.
What the fuck were they looking forward to then?
Don't know.
I mean, if this story was, it turns out Magnetic Fields fucking love the show. All right, okay, that's interesting.
Well,
if they're saying, I'm looking forward to meeting you, random person who ended up on our guest list.
Well, this is the weird thing, you see. Like, they're not fans of the show, but we watched the game.
I mean, they know it. They just fucking hate us.
Yeah, they hate us. They voted for all the other shows every Ockham Awards. They specifically voted against us. But no, so we ended up going sort of backstage, and then we had to kind of like wander in, and the lead singer was sat down, and we didn't know him. And he said, oh, so who are you friends with? And we're like, well, we're not actually friends with Pinky, who's one of the people in the band. We're friends with someone in Bristol who randomly bumped into you guys in the hotel gym sauna and ended up getting pissed with you and has now chances on to get us on the guest list because he listens to our show and thinks that we'd like the band and like speaking to you. And so she came in, we had a chat. But it turns out she's sort of peripherally interested in skepticism as a thing.
Okay. And
we're sort of like, what do you do for a living? And Alice was like, just finished doing PhD in cancer research. She's that's amazing. And then what do you do for a living? I've got this weird job where I have, and I explained what she allows you. Oh God, that sounds amazing. I knew I'm really into she was quite into what we were about. Yeah. But yeah, very, very odd experience. But they're a very well-known band.
Is it a good band?
Was it was really good, yeah.
Because I know Nicola was not well pleased. This band you had never heard of, wound up on the guest list for when she actually
drinking
knows the band,
their Ryder beers,
loves the band, and would adore to have gone backstage and met fucking Pinky and Perky or whatever the fuck they're called.
Yeah, so she was quite miffed by that whole. And she said, "Well, just tell them that your wife's a big fan of theirs." I said, "I can't say that because that is literally me saying I'm not a big fan of yours." Because I could say my wife and I are big fans of yours, but if I just say, "Oh yeah, my wife really likes you," that's synonymous with I don't particularly know who you are.
Did you think about Columboing it and just be like, "My wife"?
On the way out, one more thing. My wife loves you. My wife loves you.
Our friend and previous Skeptics with a K guest, Geraint, has just had a baby.
He has had a baby. There's a little Parry knocking about now.
There is.
Personally?
No, his partner, Laura, has just had a baby.
He did some of the work.
And pretty much the day after the baby was born, Geraint sent us a link to a story about vaccines and miscarriages.
I think he probably sat on that story for a little while, but thought, I'm not going to attempt it. Now the baby is safely delivered. You can put that one out there.
The story Geraint sent us was a piece in the Washington Post titled, I don't know why I found that sentence so hard to say. That was, for some reason, a real tongue twister. It shouldn't have been. The story Geraint sent us was a piece in the Washington Post titled, What to Know About a Study of Flu Vaccine and Miscarriage. And the article explains, researchers studying the flu vaccine in pregnancy have found a hint of a possible link between miscarriage early in pregnancy and the flu vaccine in women who received a certain version of the vaccine 2 years in a row.
Because I was very confused at this being an association between childhood vaccines and miscarriage, because at the point you're having childhood vaccines, you can't call that a miscarriage anymore. But
yeah.
You wouldn't usually have a childhood vaccine for flu, I don't think.
But yeah, the mother having a vaccine.
Yes.
While pregnant, I see.
Plausibly, it could have been if you were vaccinated as a child, you won't let it have a miscarriage. But that would be a very
long study.
Yeah, it'd be a very hard thing to tease out.
The article is covering research funded by the Centre for Disease Control, the CDC, which was published in Vaccine earlier this month. It was an observational study in which the authors looked at the data of women who had miscarried in the first 5 to 20 weeks of pregnancy. They specifically looked for women who had miscarried between September and April across 2 seasons, 2010 to 2011 and 2011 to 2012, since the flu vaccine is seasonal. So they wanted to specifically get women who had the option to have the vaccine.
But a particular vaccine as well. So they'd had the 2012 version of the vaccine.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So they'd had a specific vaccine, and there was a good chance that the women they were looking at might have had it. They didn't all have it. They didn't necessarily take just people who'd had the vaccination, but they took data from people who had a good chance of being offered the vaccine rather than, in spring or summer where you're not likely to have been offered the vaccination. Okay. They took control women who had live or stillbirths at over 20 weeks gestation. So they paired one-to-one control mothers to the mothers who had had miscarriages. And they looked at a correlation between vaccination and miscarriage across those cases. So they had 485 women in each group. The controls were matched so that they were as similar as possible. They identified some differences between the cases, or women who had miscarried, and the controls, or women who had delivered live or still babies. They say in the paper, cases were significantly older than controls and more likely to be African American, to have a history of over or equal to 2 previous miscarriages, and to have smoked during pregnancy.
Okay, so they were matched controls, but not matched on every characteristic.
No.
Because they were matching for other attributes.
Yes, absolutely.
Because the homeopaths get grumpy when you do matched control. So I think it's either Shang or Lind, with one of the two big homeopathy meta-analyses, uses matched controls where they get a load of people who had homeopathy, and then they get matched controls who had
the same conditions and things,
conventional intervention, and compares them. So look, homeopathy does fuck all. And the homeopaths get very grumpy about the use of matched controls because
because it's supposed to be individualized.
It's because in order to be able to do match controls, they had to discard a load of homeopathy studies because they couldn't find matches for them.
Oh, okay.
And so they only did studies where they were able to produce a matched control. And they're saying, but those studies you threw away, that's where all the positive data was. Just by coincidence. So yeah, they get quite grumpy about the use of matched controls. Because, of course, we don't do that in medicine. Oh, no, hang on. Yeah, we do.
So they identified a whole heap of potential factors to consider, but for their paper, they focused on vaccination. They looked at the number of women who were vaccinated within 28 days prior to their miscarriage, but who had not been vaccinated in the previous season. So that was one of the categories. There were 21 patients who had vaccination that season and within 28 days of the miscarriage, and had not been vaccinated in the previous season. The corresponding controls who were vaccinated in the same period but went on to give birth was a similar number of 20 patients. However, when they looked at the women who'd been vaccinated in the same 28-day window but had also been vaccinated against the same type of flu the previous year, so two of the same vaccinations across 2 seasons, there were 17 cases of miscarriage compared to 4 patients in the control group.
Okay, and that is quite a large incidence.
Absolutely, yes.
Difference, yeah.
It seems a very peculiar idea, though, that, I mean, I could see if you received the vaccination while you were pregnant, okay, in which case the vaccine has gone through the placenta and has got into the baby, and then the baby's then miscarried as a result.
That could be a potential mechanism, potentially, yeah.
But, and I don't know that that's the case, but I could kind of see that plausibly, but that only works if you were vaccinated a year earlier when you weren't pregnant.
So,
and there's still a bit of vaccine kicking about, or what?
That's assuming that the causal link, and so this study has not shown any causal link between vaccination.
So the study doesn't claim causality at any point. Okay.
But
the reporting probably does.
Which I'll come back to in a moment.
Okay.
But just talking about potential mechanism, of which there's nothing suggested at all. This is pure speculation. But to assume that it's the vaccine that causes the miscarriage and not the mother's immune system, which may have been previously primed by the initial vaccination.
I could see that. Although that would depend on the previous season's flu having a similarity to this season's flu for it to
absolutely. And so in this case, across both seasons, it was the same vaccination. So the mothers had the same vaccination twice.
Okay.
Or at least a vaccination for the same flu twice, for the same type of flu.
It's rare that they do the same flu 2 years in a row, though, because they sort of gamble on the most likely one to...
Yeah, and there will. I don't know if there were slight variations across the vaccines, but it was for the same HN type of flu.
Okay.
Basically across the 2 seasons.
Don't remember what the H and N is. I remember Neuraminidase. Don't remember the H. What's the H?
Hens.
Forgotten.
Alice, you're our scientist.
It's hens.
I'm not a flu scientist.
Hen 1, Neuraminidase 5. That's what you're saying it is. Okay.
It's bird flu, isn't it?
I'm not even a virologist. There's no way I have any cause to retain that information in my head.
Mike has no cause to retain it, but he has.
Well, yeah, but that's Mike.
He's retained half it.
Someone in Doctor Who had flu once, so I'm
too busy retaining science words that I actually need.
Like what? Name one.
I'm not going to name one.
Oh, because you can't. Oh, because you've not retained them.
So in the discussion of the paper, the authors mention another study conducted a few years prior, which was very similar in design and did not show the same finding. So the previous study had not found a relation between 2 vaccinations and miscarriage, nor have other studies found a link between flu vaccination and miscarriage in the past. All the evidence says vaccination during pregnancy is safe. All the advice is you should get a flu vaccination during pregnancy.
Okay.
They are not changing the advice on that. The CDC are not changing the advice. The authors are not recommending against that advice. This is just a very preliminary study and is kind of a first look at this, because although other studies have looked at it, they kind of talk about some of the potential differences between the two studies, and maybe there's ways we can do this better,
sure.
Particularly with early stage pregnancy where there might be a bit more of a question mark over safety of things. But for sure, like, the recommendation is to get vaccinated during pregnancy. The Washington Post article does warn that the findings suggest an association, not a causal link, and the research is too weak and preliminary, experts said, to change the advice, which is based on a multitude of previous studies that pregnant women should get a flu vaccine to protect them from influenza, a deadly disease that may cause serious birth defects and miscarriage. So the Washington Post coverage is quite responsible as well, I think.
And that's a reasonable point as well, is if you get flu while pregnant, that we know that's a problem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
You can miscarry and also die, which is worse than just miscarrying, for example.
And even if you don't miscarry with influenza, having flu during pregnancy can cause birth defects and things as well. Yeah. And it can lead to premature birth and all sorts of other problems that might
huge complications.
Cause complications. The authors themselves, in their paper, point out a few limitations to their study, and I think it's really important to consider the things that they've even said themselves are important to consider. So firstly, they point out that their finding is a post hoc result. So when you said that seems strange that they looked at 2 vaccinations across 2 seasons, they weren't initially expecting to find a relationship between having been vaccinated in the 2 previous seasons when there wasn't a relation between having been vaccinated in just the 28 days prior. So they hadn't designed the study with this in mind, and they point that out as a limitation in their discussion.
So that could effectively be a p-hacked result. You look at the data from enough angles and eventually one of them is going to line up.
Yeah. Which they're perfectly transparent about, and say, this is just a post hoc finding. Secondly, the authors recognise that it's difficult to study miscarriages. In particular, they point out that assigning an exact date of miscarriage is very difficult, which could affect the numbers somewhat, especially when they're using a time-based cutoff of 28 days. The third limitation is also on the basis of measuring miscarriages. The authors looked at medically registered miscarriages. This means the data could be skewed to instances when the patient knew that they miscarried, which isn't always the case. And when they sought medical help, which also may not always be the case. They also point out that people with certain comorbidities are more likely to be regularly vaccinated. And it could, in fact, be those comorbidities that are linked to the miscarriage rates. So you have something that means you're more likely to get flu. So you're more careful about getting vaccinated, especially when you're pregnant and you've had, prior vaccinations before that, because not everybody gets a flu vaccine every year.
No, but if you've got asthma, for example, you get a flu vaccine most years anyway because it can be a problem.
And if this link is between this previous...
the condition,
Condition, exactly. And so, if asthma is related to miscarriage, then that's that.
That's true. Yeah.
The study's not necessarily showing what's causing this link. The authors and the CDC point out that while it's something to require follow-up research, it's not cause for alarm just yet. There's no change in guidelines that pregnant women should be vaccinated against influenza. Not only does flu during pregnancy carry risk for both mother and baby, flu vaccination during pregnancy is the best way to protect a newborn baby, since flu vaccination is not suitable for babies under the age of 6 months.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
It's because the needles are too big. Babies are little at that point, aren't they?
Yeah, that's why, Marcia.
It's also they've got quite fat, squishy arms, so getting in
perfect for vaccines.
Yeah, we can't find the vein as easily.
Well, they don't usually.
They've got little fat, squishy arms.
Don't need to vaccinate into a vein, Marcia.
They don't put them into veins.
You
stick it into your arm.
Plunge it anywhere into
the meat,
into that little Michelin baby. You could just.
Well, they're perfect for vaccinating.
Exactly.
Vaccinate babies at birth.
Well, we vaccinate babies against certain things at certain stages in their development when we know that it's safe for them to be vaccinated with those things.
Give them all. More the merrier, I say.
And the flu vaccine, you have to wait until after 6 months.
Yeah.
The authors end their paper saying a follow-up study funded by CDC is currently underway to evaluate the risk of miscarriage after repeated influenza vaccination during the 2012-13, 2013-14 and 2014-15 influenza seasons, and results are expected by late 2018. But it's also quite important to consider the timing of this, because a few days before I read this story, I read another article which warned that the flu season this year might be worse than any on record, which is based on reports out of Australia that their flu season, which is usually a good indicator of how ours will go, was particularly bad this year, with hospitals struggling to cope with the demand for beds during their winter.
So Australia get flu before we do.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like New Year. Yeah, it happens in Australia first. So even the flu sticks by the fact that Australia's in the future.
Also, there's an island in the Pacific where it's either side of the date line. You can go and get flu on one side of the island.
You can.
And then 24 hours later, you go over and have flu again on the other side of the island.
It's terrible. Absolutely terrible. But a year later in the next flu season.
Yeah, you get the two different strains.
Yeah.
You get H5N1 and then like H1N1 on the other side of the island. It's appalling.
The NHS is particularly concerned about the strain on their resources for this winter. And actually, I do think the finding between vaccination and miscarriage has been reported fairly responsibly, with plenty of time given over to stressing that these findings are preliminary and vaccination advice has not changed. But I think it's important to be considerate about how these reports can feed into public concern and whether that changes how people make their decisions. Because if you're worried about getting vaccinated and seen media coverage about concerns about getting vaccinated, and we're coming into a season that could be particularly bad for flu this year, then that could potentially be quite dangerous.
Yeah, and especially even if all of the reports are very responsible in the way that they are kind of reporting the information, there's still a question to ask of, is this preliminary study worthy of report?
Yes. Yeah.
Because it might. There's plenty of preliminary studies out there that don't get reported. If you're going to report it, you can report it responsibly, but how does it get posted to the anti-vaccine Facebook group? How does Mike Adams report this? How does the Food Babe report this? Those people will report these badly.
This is quite interesting because looking at a couple of the news articles that covered it, they were all very similarly worded, and they were all full of quotes from the authors and people at the CDC. Now, what I think is likely to have happened, but I haven't checked, is that the CDC have put out a press release making sure that they've published this report in September and then put out a press release, and it's whether to say, is it responsible for them to put out a press release that draws attention to a finding that might not be worthy of report, or is that good practice of theirs to make sure that people don't find it?
They get ahead of the curve
and jump in, coming to their own conclusions from this study. So
turns out science communication is hard.
It's quite complicated, yes. Yeah. So I don't know at what stage you would prevent that being reported, other than hoping nobody notices that it was published. To be fair, the paper itself is pretty impenetrable, so I'm not sure necessarily it would have been covered by the media. But who knows? But of course, it's always important to discuss concerns with a qualified medical professional rather than making a decision off the back of a new study published in the general media.
So a week or so ago, an article started to circulate on social media titled "The Placebo Effect is a Lie." Not written by me.
Yes.
As you might expect. It was written by a guy called Seth Miller, who is a technology consultant from Colorado, who originally published this to little fanfare in October 2016, clearly getting the jump on me with the old placebo book before I had even thought of the idea. Miller's piece was recently republished by the blog The Mission, which claims to be a blog which aims to make people smarter, as opposed to all those blogs whose aims are to make people stupider.
Yes.
Even Mike Adams, I think, thinks he's making people smarter.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. I get the feeling Mike Adams is very cynical about what he's doing and doesn't believe it. Yeah, he can't believe a lot of what he says.
I mean, that rap career was pretty fucking cynical.
It was very cynical. I don't think he believes a lot of what he says, because so much of it is contradictory and so clearly contradicted by the sources he's citing.
Yeah, but that just means he's dissonant about it, not that he doesn't believe it.
Nah, he doesn't believe it. Let's face it. Come on.
Yeah, that's a libelous claim.
Yeah, he's a liar. And also, I'm pretty sure he killed someone.
Right, okay.
100% killed him. Yeah,
100%
killed him dead.
Straight up.
Yeah,
straight up.
Knife to the throat it was, yeah.
Yeah.
He shot JFK.
Mike Adams shot JFK.
Different JFK, not the president, just another.
Just some guy with those initials.
Yeah.
And Mike Adams just went full on.
Mike Adams went through the phone book like Terminator from Terminator. JFK, yes, stab. JFK, yes, stab. It just happens that Lee Harvey Oswald got there first. Got to that one first. The right one.
Yeah, Mike Adams must have been quite young at the time. He was.
He's older than you'd think.
Is he?
That's the most libelous thing, actually.
Is he really?
Yeah.
Okay. Seth Miller's...
Can you get out of libel just by doubling down even further to the point where it's pretty clear that you're making it up and joking?
We'll find out.
We'll soon find out.
Next time on Skeptics with a K.
If not, you'll find out something interesting on the live show.
So Seth Miller's piece opened with placebos offer a simple conceit. A sugar pill consumed by a suitably optimistic patient provides the same effect as the drug it mimics. Headaches are relieved, heart rates are lowered, confidence is built, except the whole idea, the placebo effect, is a carefully constructed fraud. Now, I'm not somebody who is really in any position to criticize glib hyperbole. Being the guy who sat on this very show and described patients misreporting their condition as lying.
You did.
A word which does rather suggest, although doesn't necessitate, a conniving, devious motive.
Well, I think if you say someone's lying, it's libel, isn't it, Mike?
Possibly so. All patients in placebo arms lie.
Yeah, and they also killed a guy. It's fine. You're fine now. As long as you go that extra step further, it's absolutely fine.
But even I winced at the phrase carefully constructed fraud, which has connotations of a deliberate and devious collusion, which I don't think is actually the case. I don't think the medical establishment has got together to construct the placebo narrative any more than I think they got together to hide the cure for cancer because they make more money by keeping people sick.
No.
I don't know if Seth Miller believes it to be a deliberate conspiracy either, but the phrase carefully constructed fraud does rather suggest that he thinks it's deliberate.
Yeah, well, you think it's a sloppily and accidentally constructed fraud.
Yeah. But as Miller's article goes on, he points out that Henry Beecher's paper, The Powerful Placebo, cites 15 studies, none of which actually present a convincing effect for placebo, and that modern reanalyses of the powerful placebo conclude that there is no real therapeutic effect there, powerful or otherwise. He also points out, as I have done, that there was a meta-analysis in the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of Internal Medicine, and the Cochrane collaboration, which claims to show that there is no objective placebo effect and that the placebo effect only manifests where patients or clinicians are afforded the opportunity to fudge the results. Just to be clear, I don't believe that anyone has malign intentions when this happens. It's simply the result of a number of psychological and social effects on your recorded data. I should also point out, because I'm not sure that I've made this clear, and it's something that I think is important, I should point out that these three meta-analyses from the New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of Internal Medicine, and Cochrane, 2001, 2004, 2010, respectively, are all by the same authors.
Okay.
All three of those meta-analyses are by the same authors, which is Robertson and Goethe.
Are these the Finnish or Dutch people?
They're Norwegian/Danish.
I was sort of right. Finnish/Dutch is basically the same as Norwegian/Danish.
I don't usually mention them on the show by name because I don't want to do what I've just done and embarrass both myself and them by mangling their names. Yeah. So I would hope that listeners are rightly suspicious, as am I, that these analyses are coming from the same pair of authors. Independent replication would be better.
Yeah.
Although I do take some comfort that these analyses have passed peer review at the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of Internal Medicine, and Cochrane, each of which being a respectable, highly regarded journal not known for publishing shit.
High impact factors, probably.
New England Journal of Medicine's impact factor is ridiculous. It's like 70-odd. It can still happen, but
I only said impact factor just to annoy Alice.
I wasn't listening.
The more reputable journals that are publishing the work, it gives you greater confidence. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does give you a little bit extra confidence.
The Lancet published Andrew Wakefield's study. So.
Yes.
But like 5 major journals didn't publish that study at once.
True.
So I take a little bit of comfort from that. I take a little bit more comfort in an independent replication, but I take a little bit of comfort that there's 3 separate peer reviewers at high-quality journals have said, yeah, this is fine. Anyway, Seth Miller refers to these reviews by saying, at best, the reviewers detected a placebo effect only for self-reported results such as pain, and only when there is a continuous graded outcome rather than a binary outcome. He then goes on to talk about how the placebo effect was actually an enabler of the controlled trial because before placebos, doctors had ethical problems experimenting on their patients and therefore controlled trials were frowned upon. I'm not persuaded by his story there that we were thinking, I'd love to do controlled trials, but they're unethical to give half the patients no medicine. Oh, hang on, placebos work. Great, we can do controlled trials.
Yeah, that's not
I
at
don't
all.
think that was fucking happening.
I agree.
But that's how he spins it. I think he's wrong. But it was interesting to see him.
What's his background?
He's a technology consultant. He's not medically trained at all.
Because
but then I'm a technology consultant and I'm medically trained at all.
But I think I've said this. I've either said this on the show before or I've said this to you before. I think a big part of the problem when it comes to placebo and part of the reason you get frustrated sometimes is that people in the medical professional, people in who are working on random controlled trials, people who are actually using the placebo effect, they don't believe it works. They know it doesn't work. That's why we use the placebo effect to kind of account for all the different types of bias that might be covered by different things. Medics,
that's why we
we
get people writing to us going, well, yeah, obviously that is what the placebo effect is.
Exactly, yeah.
And so the problem is there's this disparity between what the general public thinks of the placebo effect and what medics think of the placebo effect. So no medic thinks they need to correct anybody, and the public think there's this entirely different definition behind placebo effect.
I think some medics do believe that the placebo effect is the magic thing.
There's people who are medically trained going around saying placebo effects are incredibly powerful and that colours of pills make a difference. For example.
And Daniel Glasser in the Guardian saying fighting off a cold will make a cold go away faster and nonsense like that. But I accept what you're saying, that within academia it's not necessarily
it's not considered that
viewed the same way it is by the general
academia for
public.
sure, and people who are setting up these trials for the most part. There are medics that believe all sorts of bollocks. There
are fucking 50 GPs who are also homeopaths.
Yeah, so
membership of the faculty of homeopathy.
But people who are undertaking random, RCTs are generally, by and large, understanding that the placebo is just a way of accounting for bias. It's not. It doesn't have a powerful effect. To then say that they're happy because they can be ethical about studies because the placebo effect works. Most of them don't believe that placebo effect does work.
That's not even the problem with his fiction. The problem with his fiction is that not doing any trials is even less ethical than doing placebo-controlled trials. So the idea that, before we can't do a controlled trial because we've given half people nothing, so we'll just carry on giving people with no idea whether it works or not. There's no one who would look at that and say that was an ethical position. So his fiction falls apart for that reason.
I think he's full of shit
on that bit. Absolutely.
On that thing. But what I wanted to discuss today wasn't Seth Miller's article per se, but rather the reaction to it. As I was initially reading the article comments, I was messaging you, Alice, sending you some of the things that people were saying, and your comment to me at the time was that the placebo effect is a sacred cow for many people. Although I've got no idea why some people hang on to it so desperately, unless I'm wrong, of course, and that would explain why they hang on to it so desperately, because it's fucking true, and I'm full of shit, and that's why people hang on to it so, which is a very real possibility.
It's a shrinking possibility at this stage.
But here is a comment from below Miller's article. The thinking in this article is sloppy and leads to confusion. Read this clear and careful article from Vox instead. And then link to the Vox article we talked about on the show a few weeks ago, which, as I said at the time, was something of a mixed bag. Vox
Vox sometimes...
It wasn't that bad, that one, was it?
Sometimes do all right stuff. They sometimes do all right stuff mixed in with some weird stuff.
I felt the Vox article hit a lot of the right points, but then just failed to bring it together at the end and realise what those points were actually leading to. Which was a shame, but overall I thought the Vox article was actually very good. That was quite a gentle comment. Some commenters were a little more scathing. Science cannot prove an absence. Failure to find something is not proof of its absence, said one commenter, which is a valid point, if maybe needlessly philosophical. A common refrain is that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, which is almost true.
You can't prove homeopathy doesn't work. You can actually,
I would argue that absence of evidence is evidence of absence if we looked where we would expect to find the evidence and it wasn't there. That does support, although does not prove, the hypothesis that the effect is not actually fucking there.
Is that basically how physics works as well? Like a lot of physics, when it comes to trying to figure out all different, like particle physics, trying to figure out what different particles do, they kind of have to look at a place where they expect to see a particle and hope to see a particle.
And if it's there, great. And if it's not, maybe we have to think again.
Yeah.
Although, in fairness, they would equally say the fact that we didn't detect the Higgs here doesn't say there isn't a Higgs in the form that we think it is.
But once you've done it X amount of times, then
it's indicative that probable. Yeah.
You've eventually
you
entirely
can infer that it's unlikely.
Exactly.
It could be the case that any prospective effect that we are looking for is too small to be detected by our stupid clunky test.
Which would mean it's too small to have an effect.
A more sensitive test would pick it up. But as you say, in the case of the placebo effect, the effect size is so vanishingly fucking small as to be irrelevant if it exists at all.
I had this conversation at Newcastle Skeptics. I did Newcastle Skeptics during the week, and there was a chap in the audience who is... I think he said he'd worked in quantum physics for a long time. I'm not sure whether he was at one of the universities. So he was saying that he didn't believe homeopathy worked at all. But he had really bad hay fever one time, and he was adamant that it wouldn't work, that it wouldn't be any good.
Yeah.
But then he took it, and his hay fever went away within an hour.
Yeah.
And then he never got it as bad again. And he said, now I don't believe that it worked.
Yeah.
But I started thinking that if it did work, what would be the mechanism? And the only thing that I could think was that he would have to be working on a quantum level. I'm like, I mean...
It sounds an awful lot like regression to the mean to me.
Yeah, I said, well, I have terrible hay fever as well, and sometimes I don't take anything, and an hour later it's fine, especially if I find myself distracted by something and I'm not itching my nose and things swelling the nasal veins up. And I was saying, I said, this is the interesting thing is, if you weren't a quantum physicist, there is no way in the world you'd be looking for a quantum explanation to this.
Yeah.
You'd be looking for, if you're a biologist by trade, you'd be looking for biological reasons why this would work. So you're just the hammer looking for the nail, but there isn't a nail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think it's a reasonable shorthand in a pop science article to colloquially say there is no effect when what we technically mean is these data do not support the existence of the effect.
Yeah.
The latter is more accurate, but that kind of indirect language can sometimes be unhelpful when we're dealing with public engagement of science.
Yeah, people don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
As per the thing that Alice just talked about in terms of the correlation between flu vaccines and miscarriage.
And it can lead the public to think that scientists have got no confidence in their findings because scientists always speak in this tentative... language, which is because that's the right thing to do, but when you're dealing with public engagement, that carries its own set of problems.
Not only do scientists have confidence in their findings, they can measure the exact degree to which of their confidence.
Give you a number of how fucking confident they are.
Exactly.
The commenter who was named John Continues, however, going on to take issue with...
John Continues, that's a very weird name.
John Continues. I think it's a solid name. He goes on to take issue with Seth Miller's claim that the placebo effect, quote, only changes self-reported results. John complained, only self-reported results? Excuse me, but I know how I feel better than any doctor or scientist.
But that's a self-reported result.
Now, unfortunately for John, it is not as simple as that. I will grant that John knows how he feels better than a doctor, but that does not mean that how he feels is an accurate reflection of his condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a doctor knows how he is better than he does.
There are several known effects which fool with the relationship between your actual condition, how that condition makes you feel, and how you report how you're feeling to the experimenter. We're at least 2 layers removed from any genuine effect there. And because of things like the Hawthorne effect, experimenter effect, recall bias, confirmation bias, and so on, that is a problem. We've gone through 2 layers of indirection, and we're expecting to get an accurate result out of that. Well, it's not going to happen, which is why we do placebo-controlled trials to capture those the biases introduced by that indirection. So while you might know how you feel better than a doctor, it doesn't always mean that how you feel is an accurate reflection of your condition, or that, more importantly, changes in how you're feeling accurately represent changes in your condition, or that changes in the report of how you're feeling accurately reflect changes in how you're feeling, which then accurately reflect changes in your condition. This is why we are suspicious of self-reported outcomes.
Yeah, also, I know how I feel better than a doctor, therefore I know what the placebo effect is better than a placebo effect researcher.
John's indignant reaction to suspicion of self-reported outcomes is understandable but misplaced. It reminded me of something Steve Novella likes to talk about sometimes. If somebody says to him, look, I know what I saw, he'll sometimes reply, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Because what you see isn't actually what you see, it is filtered and processed and messed with by your brain. And even if what you see is an accurate reflection of what your eyes were looking at, the malleability of human memory means that every time you think about what you saw, what you saw actually changes a little bit, and your memory is changed and distorted over time. And so 20 years later, that memory might actually be completely different. You go, so I know what I saw. No, you don't actually.
You don't know what you saw.
10 years later, you were saying something completely different.
It's also something Mark Crislip says about when he's training doctors and people, that the most dangerous words in medicine are "in my experience."
Sure,
by a distance.
Yeah. And it's interesting when you do studies on that, where you show somebody an event and say, okay, record what you saw, and they write down and they recall firsthand seconds later onto a tape what they saw. You then bring them back a couple of months later, say, tell us what you saw, and they say, well, I saw this, and it's different to the first recording.
So
you play them the first recording, and the present them goes, no, I was wrong back then. I'm definitely right about what I saw now. And they double down on the present version of the events being the accurate one, and the past version.
True.
I got that wrong. That was a mistake. John then went on to invoke scientism and complains that science is just not prepared to accept anybody's word for anything.
Well, it isn't. It shouldn't.
Well, in some cases, we have to accept somebody's word. For example, how much pain are you in?
Yes.
Because there's literally nothing else we can do.
But that's not science accepting it. That's science accepting that we don't have a better measure.
Isn't it?
It's science going, well, I can't help you, mate. You're on your own there.
But it's probably a good thing that we don't take people's word for things, because it turns out that sometimes a person's word, even with the best intentions, can be misleading, which leads us to bad conclusions. None of that matters to John, however, I expect, because he then goes on to claim there are reportedly some tribes in which the mere condemnation to death by a witch doctor... Sorry, actually, what he says is condemnation to death by witch doctor-type people can lead to a person's death. And if that is the case, it seems ridiculous to imagine that a person's perception of their situation as influenced by others can have no effect on them.
I mean, at this point, you're just pulling apart random internet commenters.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough.
This is just John having a rant.
But he's wrong, isn't he?
I mean, I'm sure there are reports of tribes like that. But what John has done here is illustrate beautifully why we shouldn't be simply taking people's words for things, because otherwise we'd be believing bollocks like this.
Yeah.
So moving on from John, the random internet commenter, let's go to a different commenter. Another guy weighed in on this one who said, somebody is obviously being paid by the pharmaceutical companies. Look up Dr. Joe Dispenza and his massive database of clinical proof that will prove the author has absolutely no idea what they're talking about or is obviously paid off. Sad.
Sad.
God. So we got the old big pharma gambit in there with a little edge of Trumpism.
Yeah, Joe Dispenza.
But I was interested in the reference to Joe Dispenza, someone who I actually hadn't heard of. Marsh, I gather you've heard of him from your...
No, I just find his name amazing.
No, just think it's a fun name?
For someone who is presumably involved in some sort of medical care, and his name is Dispenza.
Dispenza, yeah. Joe Dispenza is the author of the book You Are the Placebo, Making Your Mind Matter.
Oh, God.
According to his Twitter biography, he is an expert on change, the brain, the mind, and human potential.
Imagine being an expert on change. What are you really good at? Stuff that's not the same. Anything that is not the same as it used to be, I am the expert on that. Name me one thing, I'll tell you how it's changed.
I mean, it's a good job title if you can get it.
Yeah, head of change.
Head of change.
Yeah.
Oh, he's just very good at counting coins.
Coins, it is, yeah. He's just got a lot of 2 pences. He's an expert on chains. Yeah, that's a 1979. He's a numismatist. That's what he is.
So he's an expert on change, the brain, the mind, and human potential. And he is, of course, a chiropractor.
Oh, of course he is.
So not an expert on any of those things.
No.
In 2014, Harriet Hall wrote about Joe Dispenza for the JREF blog Swift. In response to the claim made by Joe Dispenza that he had shattered 6 vertebrae in an accident.
I completely misheard shattered then as shattered.
He just shat out 6 vertebrae.
That's a hell of an accident.
That's a terrible accident.
You've had a serious smash if afterwards you've shat out 6 vertebrae.
But that's what it means by an accident. I've had an accident. I've shat out a vertebra.
Yeah, Dispenza claimed that he had shattered 6 vertebrae.
It sounds like he's a vertebra dispenser.
In an accident. He refused all medical treatment and then healed his injury through, quote, thought alone. Harriet Hall responded on the JREF blog Swift by saying, Dispenza is not some lone genius who has made some new scientific breakthrough. He isn't even a medical doctor, only a doctor of chiropractic. There is no mystery here. As a science-based medical doctor, I've got no reason to think that the healing of his fractures had anything to do with his thoughts or his meditation practices. Fractures have always healed themselves. Mm-hmm. He was fortunate that even without surgical fixation, his fractures healed without complication. If you thought Dispenza was a credible witness, you might be surprised to learn that he is a New Age woo-monger, a gullible believer in an imaginary quantum field that supposedly responds to human thoughts and intentions. He was featured in the reprehensible movie What the Bleep Do We Know? And has no evidence to support his claims, only testimonials, fanciful hypotheses, and speculation. So that's what happens when you look up Joe Dispenza, as was suggested by the commenter.
Yeah.
The next commenter was a little bit more measured in their criticism of Seth Miller, who they said, I think you're overstating this. The placebo effect is not a lie and has been scientifically proven. They then provide a link to a 2013 article from Harvard Magazine.
Okay.
Profiling the work of Ted Kapchuk.
Oh, Ted!
The placebo effect researcher that we spoke about last episode and who was described by David Gorski as overselling his findings.
Who, every time you mention him, I forget I've ever heard his name before, and then you tell him, oh, yeah, that rings a bell, actually.
Yeah. You'll find Kapchuk's name on a list of authors for several studies into the placebo effect, and this article from Harvard Magazine is mostly a puff piece for those studies and for Kapchuk in general. One thing they do talk about, however, which I was not aware of, is Kapchuk's credentials. An acupuncturist by training, it says.
Jesus.
He is an unlikely leader in the halls of academia.
Yeah, he is fucking unlikely.
With a degree in Chinese medicine,
Jesus.
He is one of the few faculty members at Harvard Medical School with neither a PhD nor an MD.
A bull by training. He's an unlikely owner of a china shop.
Which I think is genuinely amazing.
It sounds like they're proud that he's
outside the mainstream.
He's the only one that doesn't have a PhD
or an MD.
And he's the one coming up with stuff that no one else agrees with. So that's how much of a maverick he is, that he can do that. He can revolutionise a field despite having no knowledge of it.
Now, I want to be clear that I'm not arguing we should be dismissing Kapchuk's work because he's an acupuncturist. You can be an acupuncturist and still do good science. Papers should stand and fall on their own merits, not the CVs of their authors. It would also be deeply hypocritical of me to say, what the fuck does Kapchuk know he's a TCM practitioner, when a perfectly reasonable retort would be, what the fuck does Mike Hall know he's a web developer?
I'm not sure that would be a perfectly reasonable retort. You're 0, he's -5. On the scale, is that you aren't actively doing something that runs contrary to medical evidence. You're just not involved in medical evidence at all.
But we both lack expertise in the field that we're supposedly involved in.
But he's got negative expertise.
Yeah,
he's got incorrect. If he believes TCM is an effective treatment and that acupuncture is effective, then he has beliefs that are very clearly run contrary to medical expertise,
medical scientific evidence.
Well, on that point. There was a line in the Harvard article where it says, Kapchuk says it was his success as an acupuncturist that made him leave the profession for academia. The patients who came to me got better, he says, but sometimes their relief began before he'd even started the treatment. He didn't doubt the value of acupuncture, but he suspected that something else was at work.
He probably should have doubted the value of acupuncture at that point. He probably
should have done. And maybe he does now. Maybe he's moved on since he's joined Harvard Medical School and
maybe he's denounced his degree as a
placebo researcher.
TCM chap.
But this was the origin of Kapchuk's research into the placebo effect. He wanted to know why his acupuncture started to work before he'd even unboxed the needles and not put on his gloves. Because, of course, acupuncturists never put on their gloves.
Yeah.
Importantly, however, although the commenter was quoting from this article to refute the placebo effect is a lie article from Seth Miller, the conclusion of the Harvard Magazine article could be read as coming down closer to Seth Miller's view. Harvard goes on to say, in a paper titled, Is the Placebo Powerless?, 2 Danish researchers reviewed 114 published studies involving 7,500 patients and questioned both the research methods and the short duration of placebo studies. This is the paper we talked about earlier from the New England Journal of Medicine in 2001. Harvard asked Ted Kapchuk what he thought about this study. When Kapchuk talks about the 2001 paper now, he winces, but then nods with acceptance. When I first read it, I was worried I'd be out of a job, he says. But frankly, he was absolutely right. So Kapchuk agrees with the 2001 meta-analysis.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was a fascinating quote. It also seems utterly contradictory to the things that Kapchuk says to the press when he's talking about his placebo research.
Yeah.
So I would be very interested to know what Ted Kapchuk's real view of the placebo effect is. If he does agree that the effect cannot be distinguished from bias, then why is he talking about doctors having to invoke the right magic words when they hand the pills over in order to make them work better? If he thinks it's just biased reporting, why is he saying, well, we need to study what the best word is, and the physician should be thinking about this when they hand over the bottle? Because, well, those are contradictory positions.
Yeah, completely.
For me. So I've talked about just a handful of the responses to this article. There were several more. There were some people on Facebook saying that Miller is absolutely definitely wrong because you should go and read Chapter 5 of Bad Science by Ben Goldacre.
Oh, lovely.
There were people saying the placebo effect is real and 2 blue tablets work better than 2 white tablets, so keep believing in your favourite placebo.
Yeah, lovely.
And for some people, even skeptics, the placebo effect is a sacred cow, despite the remarkably slim evidence base. We're quite used on this show to, and people in the skeptical community in general, to picking up a study which proves homeopathy works, say, or whatever, and then pointing out that this was a study performed with no blinding on 17 mice and patient satisfaction was the outcome measure, and we'll point at those studies and we'll point out those flaws and say patient satisfaction is a really bad outcome measure and bad blinding will lead to bad results and they're fucking mice and the numbers are too small to be meaningful anyway and the population is not representative and all that kind of stuff. But you do the same study, and instead of it being about homeopathy, it's about placebo effects, then even top-flight skeptics defend its conclusion to the hilt.
All right, well, seeing as Mike is currently eating a biscuit, and we know better than to do that on air after the what I like to call Biscuit Storm 3000, a couple of episodes, well, a couple of months ago. So QED is now very, very close. It's like 3 or 4-ish weeks away, the 14th and 15th of October. And we've announced some more stuff, haven't we, Mike?
Yeah, sorry.
Good.
middle of a biscuit.
A few things we've announced. Let's have a look here. So we announced the Quackery Comms and Science Moms panel. This is a panel where we're going to be looking at the ways in which quacks communicate and whether anything we as skeptics can learn from the techniques of quackery communications and also what techniques are being used by skeptics to try and communicate with the public. So we're going to have David Gorski from Science-Based Medicine. We're going to have Britt Hermes, who's a blogger and former naturopath and was absolutely fantastic at the last QED. We're going to have Caroline Rance. She's going to be talking about she's got an insight in the history of quackery. So I think it's really interesting to get her perspective on how quacks used to communicate their ideas and whether there's any similarities to how things are being done right now. And we're also going to have Natalie Newell, who's the director of Science Moms, talking about the work of the Science Moms and the film that they've produced. And I'm going to be on there. I'm going to be hosting that panel and offering my input on how to communicate the debunkery of quackery.
And we have previously announced that we're going to be screening Science Moms at QED.
We are.
So if you want, you can watch Science Moms and then go to the Quackery Comms and Science Moms panel and look at the kind of people having a conversation about the kind of science outreach that Science Moms was trying to do.
That's absolutely true. We're also going to have a live recording of the Book Shambles podcast, which is the Robinins and Josie Long podcast. So Robin is going to be coming to QED and hosting a live Book Shambles where Helen Shersky, Dean Burnett, Helen Keane and Ginny Smith are going to be talking about their favourite science books and their least favourite science books and generally talking about books and science.
Yeah, QED's list of podcasts has got Skeptics with a rapidly sliding down the list of best quality podcasts.
That is true. We're just there, one above incredulous, so it's absolutely fine.
Slammed.
And the other panel that we have announced since the last show is the Science of Game of Thrones.
Yes, we have. Yeah, so that's going to feature Helen Keane.
Helen Keane is she wrote a book about the science of Game of Thrones. She wrote the book
Science of Game of Thrones. It was actually Helen who phoned us up and said, "Hey guys, do you think you could do a panel out of this? Because I wrote this book."
And it should be pretty cool.
We looked at that. So that's going to be quite good. We also have Elio Garcia.
We have
who is a Game of Thrones super fan. Like, literally, George R.R. Martin phones this guy up and says, if I have this character do this, is that going to contradict anything else I've done? And they go, yeah, it does, mate. Chapter 6, the third book, you're completely fucked if you do that.
Yeah,
George goes, all right, yeah, sorry, mate. Yeah, sorry.
They are for Game of Thrones what you are for Doctor Who,
Quite
basically.
often, yeah.
Except Stephen Moffat doesn't call you up, because if he did, you'd give him a mouthful, probably.
That's true. I would. I certainly would. I've got a lot to say to Stephen Moffat.
We're also going to have... so Elio Garcia is on there, but also on there is Dr. Gerardo Garcia.
Gerardo Garcia, yeah.
No relation. Dr. Gerardo Garcia is the herpetologist in charge of the reptiles at Chester Zoo.
Yeah, he's head of invertebrates and lower vertebrates.
The lower vertebrates. We're not sure if he's head of people who've shat out a vertebrate, but we may be able to ask him. Shat out a vertebra, not a vertebrate. Shitting out a vertebrate is something completely different, and you also don't want to do that either. But he's going to have, obviously, a lot to say about the biology and potentiality of dragons and that kind of
Given
stuff.
that part of his day job, he literally looks after a dragon.
Yeah, he looks after a proper dragon.
He literally looks after a dragon.
A proper dragon. Not a dragon, but a proper dragon.
It doesn't breathe fire, but it's
still a dragon.
It's a fucking dragon.
That panel is going to be watched over by Deborah Hyde, folklorist and editor of the Skeptic mag. So that's going to be an interesting and different change of pace, really, I'd say, for QED panels and things.
We'll see, and we're hoping what that's going to be is, we'll use Game of Thrones as a jumping off point to talk about some cool signs.
Yeah, so if you don't like Game of Thrones, you probably still shouldn't go to that panel. It's going to be very Game of Thrones heavy. There's no two ways about it.
We'll also have a Science of Doctor Who panel, although that largely consists of people approaching me in the bar and saying, Mike, what do you reckon about this?
That is true. That exactly.
That's not going to be any kind of formal session. That's just going to be me talking shit. We've also recently announced the Friday Night Pub Quiz.
Yes.
So the Friday Night Pub Quiz is being organised this year by Trent Burton from Cosmic Shambles.
Yes.
As they've renamed themselves. They were Cosmic Genome. They've changed the name to Cosmic Shambles now.
Yes, to fit with Book Shambles and Science Shambles and various other
Book Shambles
shambling
brands. But Trent is organising that. If you want to take part in the quiz, you can do that by going to the QED website. And there will be a link in the news section in the article about the quiz saying, hey, this is how to do the quiz and this is how to take part. So if you want to take part in the quiz, and space is very limited for the quiz, so if you want to take part in the quiz, get onto that as soon as you can. QED is £109, £75 if you're a student or if you're under 18, not £69 as Jeff put out in a thing recently to somebody. Tickets are available from QEDcon.org. Tickets are limited. They are vanishing quickly, remarkably quickly at the moment, actually.
They are, yeah, very much
so. If you want to come to QED, and we recommend that everybody does, because it's genuinely a good time, QEDcon.org.
I am speaking at Sheffield Skeptics in the pub on Monday, the 25th of September.
Oh, nice.
So if people want to come, I've had a listener tweet and tell me, Tammy Webster's tweeted to tell me she's booked a train ticket to travel across to Sheffield to see see the talk.
That's cool.
Which is quite sweet.
I did Sheffield Skeptics a while ago, and the Q&A was like 2.5 hours. They said it was their second longest Q&A they ever had. The longest one was Rebecca Watson.
Really?
So I had an intensely long Q&A, but
I'm trying to think whether I've been that. I've had some long Q&As there.
I had to drive to Sheffield. I mean, you're not going on your little motorbike along to Sheffield, I hope, because you have to go off that fucking windy road with a cliff either side.
Oh, Snake Pass.
I
get a train. It's dead easy. It's easy getting the train to Sheffield. It's quite nice.
It was a nice train ride, I can imagine, but I remember driving along the Snake Pass in the rain and the wet and the fog and doing like 20 miles an hour, panicking that I was going to drive off a cliff at any moment, and then driving past a sign that said 50. Yeah. I'm like, you can fuck off. 50? Don't be fucking ridiculous.
Well, speaking of Q&As from Skeptics in the pub, I did Newcastle Skeptics recently, and that was an interesting Q&A because there was a lady in the audience who was a homeopath and energy healer who was not happy with anything I was saying.
I mean, she wasn't an energy healer, was she?
No. So she started just interrupting everything in the Q&A, and all the questions were going to her, and ended up being a long conversation where she was like quoting the head of the Lancet, the editor of the Lancet. The editor of the Lancet said 50% of what we publish is wrong, and that's because we take money from pharmaceutical industries to just publish anything they tell me. I said, did he definitely say the second bit, or was it just the first bit? And I said, is it funny how you only quote the stuff in the Lancet that you think agrees with you, and not all the other science papers that show that what you're talking about is wrong? So she's going on for quite a while, and at one point after she was speaking extensively, I said, just a quick question. If someone came to you with cancer, would you treat them? And she went, well, and it's like, I mean, that's already too slow for that to be a no. But she was like, well, I couldn't possibly say that I do because it's illegal. I mean, it's outrageous that it's illegal for me even to tell you that I treat the people. But I do have people who come, and I said, are you treating anybody who's got cancer right now? And she went, well, there is a lady who has cervical cancer, and the doctor said she needs, and the whole room is like... It's like, well, it was fun to see how this goes from crazy lady shouting weird things and being interrupting to everyone to, oh, not only does she believe in energy stuff, she's also treating cancer patients. She is probably going to kill someone. So I don't know if you're going to get a Q&A like that in your talk, Alice.
Hopefully not, but I'm going to be talking about cancer. So
yeah.
Depends who's interested in my talk on cancer and pseudoscience around cancer.
Well, I can give you a number if I can tell her to go along if you like.
So that's Monday the 25th, 7:30 in Sheffield at Farm Road Sports and Social Club.
Yeah.
Aside from that, then, I think that is all we have time for.
I think it is, All
that remains then is for me to thank March for coming along today.
Cheers.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.